What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and following up on last night, Blizzard is getting absolutely embarrassed right now. Absolutely, positively embarrassed by Final Fantasy XIV, and it's a rod of their own making. This is the monopolistic fat cat Activision coming in and telling Blizzard to focus more on, microtransactions and the amount store and the and then honestly making the game great. Final Fantasy XIV, and I'm so happy to see this, has really worked hard to reward its players. It's a game that still consists of a good bit of fan service. You can get those nice bunny, the bunny butler girls, and I really like the way that they do the seasonality content, which they do in WoW too. But Final Fantasy didn't win the MMO race overnight, but I do believe that it's going to, now that they've committed to, for the past, multiple years, they have continuously worked to improve a game that came out and was deeply flawed at its launch, and a lot of people were really upset with it. And what you have now, though, is years and years and years of diligent improvements that have been made by the Final Fantasy XIV online team that are finally now paying dividends. And you couple that with the staleness of World of Warcraft and their disappointment with the latest content patch, and one of the world's largest, if not the largest, WoW streamer defecting to Final Fantasy. It spells disaster. WoW disappointment plus Twitch starts mass exodus into Final Fantasy. But we have this. Final Fantasy XIV is breaking its player count records day after day. Final Fantasy XIV is having what you'd call a bit of a moment. This is via Paul Tassi. The MMO, long thought as one of the gold standards for fixing your broken release, exactly, has risen to become massively popular over the last few years, but for a variety of reasons, the game is currently surging like never before. Back on July 5th, it was reported that Final Fantasy XIV had broken its previous concurrent player record on Steam of 41,000 players, set in June 2019 of 47,000. But what hasn't been reported is the game has been repeatedly breaking that record a couple of different times since then. Most notable, the past weekend, it broke the record again in consecutive days with 52,000 players and 58,000 players. What he's not mentioning here, too, though, is that there is a massive player base that don't use Steam for the game. I don't use Steam. I use their custom launcher, and it is bad. But I use it. This time around, when things started to buckle, at a certain point in the past few days, Square Enix actually stopped selling digital codes for PlayStation and PC for Final Fantasy XIV. New players were finding it difficult to even make it through the character creation without issue. Others were met with login queues not normally seen outside of major expansion releases. What's going on? Well, there's a couple different theories, stemming from the game offering longer free trials than usual, but most are centered around the concept of World of Warcraft refugees, as it's been attributed to one man in particular, Asmongold. Asmongold is a hugely popular World of Warcraft streamer who on July 3rd finally started playing Final Fantasy XIV for the first time after many years. The stream averaged something like 150,000 viewers, and while he was mobbed by fans in-game, he pushed through and has been consistently playing the game since then. I don't think it's a coincidence that the play count started surging pretty much exactly that day. The records were broken a short while later and continue to be broken now. Asmongold may have been the trigger, but it's WoW itself driving many players into the arms of the alternative. Blizzard does not release WoW subscription numbers anymore, shocking, but as a company, Blizzard has lost 2 million players in the last quarter. In general, Blizzard games are down almost 30% of their players in the last 3 years. Blizzard maintains World of Warcraft is still performing well for them, but we'll see what next quarter brings. As much as we can track if this is Final Fantasy surge is really driven by WoW Exodus. Switchovers or not, Asmongold clearly sparked interest in the game, which has snowballed into Final Fantasy XIV breaking its concurrent player records by close to 50%. Will next weekend bring even more shattered records? We'll know soon enough. Oh, it'll happen. I just checked in on Asmon, and he's streaming for like 80,000 people in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. I'm pretty sure that and by the way, if I can say this, like, just as a viewer of Asmongold, he's never looked happier. He looks so happy playing the game, and that's infectious. That's what you're supposed to get. And, like, that's how I feel jumping back into Final Fantasy. And to be fair, I felt that way about Classic WoW, too. Getting back in and kind of realizing that I had limitless content. I had limitless worlds to expand and re-experience. I believe then, too, Asmon was extraordinarily happy when they launched Classic. But for me, I had played both games kind of, maybe a couple hundred hours originally. I was in college, so I didn't play that often, and eventually couldn't pay for the games anymore. Getting back into them later in life, I jumped back into Final Fantasy XIV maybe 8 months ago or something like that. I'm on Primal server, by the way. The idea that I jumped in, it was right around Halloween, so I think it was like last October. I jumped in, and I'm like, man, this game is so much better than I remember. Because I had played it originally when it first dropped, and I think I was it 11 that I was playing before that, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. It's not very good. And I jumped back in after so many of my viewers said, bro, like, you've got to give Final Fantasy a chance. And I did, and I remember just running through Gardania, and there were like pumpkins and Halloween stuff everywhere, and it looked good. And it felt like I was in a village full of pumpkin, like a actual Halloween decoration, not just a couple of, random pumpkins around. Now, there's basically been a perfect storm according to MMORPG.com. There's absolutely no ignoring the massive exodus of gamers into Final Fantasy XIV, and to put it bluntly, it's unprecedented for any game that's run as long as Final Fantasy XIV has. Players are noting that servers are getting clogged, and even the Square Enix store is having issues getting codes out fast enough. Some call it the World of Warcraft exodus, and many are coming from the long-standing king of MMORPGs. Frankly, though, it's not that simple. A perfect storm of factors from all across the gaming space has led to these last 2 weeks. Yes, this includes backlash against the game's inspiration, World of Warcraft, which even the game's director has praised, but players couldn't go to any other MMORPG, including Guild Wars 2. Oh, they could, I'm sorry. Which has similar free account system to Final Fantasy and a perfectly decent story. What has powered Final Fantasy XIV? It's been chugging for quite a while, and plenty of factors over the past few years give it fuel. First of all, first things you'll hear about Final Fantasy XIV is that it gets better after A Realm Reborn. The base game, in fact, despite being the base game, A Realm Reborn is actually the game's 2.0 edition, and it's already better per se. The tale of Final Fantasy XIV's rebirth is an integral part of the game's fame. Director Naoki Yoshida, who previously helped keep the Dragon Quest series afloat at Square Enix, had been brought on board during Final Fantasy XIV's 1.0 game, which, despite many quirks that are still praised to this day, and was considered a complete and utter disaster. The game made a canonical reset by unleashing Bahamut, and the franchise most powerful creatures to date upon the world in real time, and ending the client and servers at that exact moment. You obviously have expanded home time, expanded trial. Already, Final Fantasy XIV is a free trial for a while with plenty of the standard anti-bot restrictions, no marketplace, no sending social requests, no private messages, and a currency limit. Notably, it ran up to level 35, which only gets players up to a major character revelation before leaving them on an awkward cliffhanger. It also, of course, doesn't allow a fuller kit of combat class abilities and much other things. When the lockdowns hit in 2020, even the limited trial was more than enough for many players to hop on board and give it a shot before committing to the game. There was an obvious bump in players as many, quote, quiet worlds began having queues during peak times. However, to save time, Final Fantasy 15 announced a 5.3 patch, Reflections in Crystal, which would expand the trial. Firstly, bookmark the patch in your mind if you're keeping track of timeline. Then the expanded trial was also among a slew of other quality of life updates and the end of the Shadowbringers arc. Of course, World of Warcraft is not... Final Fantasy is not World of Warcraft's worst enemy. For now, the elephant in the room is World of Warcraft. And by the way, all these players that are leaving World of Warcraft, I don't know. There's no evidence yet, outside of the players they lost last quarter, We don't know for sure if they're all canceling their Blizzard accounts or if they're just picking up a second MMO. Blizzard still makes the same amount of money if you keep paying them and you're not playing their game. You have WoW players converting to Final Fantasy has been a phenomenon for quite a bit. WoW refugees is a common term used for such players, who often contrast their former home with Final Fantasy XIV's relatively accepting user base, approachable combat, and transparent development team and consistent story. Excuse me, these were fairly neutral and even relaxed assessments by such refugees until lately, as vitriol towards World of Warcraft and its development team has been bubbling for a few months now. Players waited for WoW's first expansion pack 9.1 for 9 months, hoping at least the story would improve. All the while, complaints of a toxic player base, time-gated story content, and grinding that felt practically like a forced job of its own continued to bubble up and wear players down. In the meantime, there's been a slow conversion of curious WoW and other gaming content creators into Final Fantasy XIV. Many that pull numbers on YouTube and Twitch made the jump, including Jesse Cox, Rich Campbell, and the largest yet has been WoW-centric YouTuber and streamer Asmongold. I think you look at his first stream, brought in 200,000 viewers, and he continues to play the game to this day as progress. There are good problems to have, and Final Fantasy has them. I hope that they can adjust this. If we look at their numbers right now on Steam, like they're the 16th overall with 43,000 players right now. But again, that doesn't even include, CSGO is still this popular. It doesn't include all the individual launchers. And if we look at Twitch stats, we can see, let's just see games. Top games on Twitch last 7 days. Well, neither World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy are on that list. Here's World of Warcraft with 59,000 in the last 7 days. Final Fantasy, 37,000. Certainly heavily affected when Asmon streams, though. You can see huge peak, 40,000 viewers here, 63,000 viewers on Saturday. I happen to know today Asmon's got over 80,000. So, you can look just at the insane increases. The average went from 7,000, 6,000, 4,000 to 37,000, 29,000 gain at 406% with peak streaming numbers at 221K. I suspect Square Enix should be sending Asmongold a nice little package in the mail. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.